Washington picks up three-star defensive back Ksani Jiles.
You are Locked On Huskies, your daily podcast on the Washington Huskies, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back into another edition of the Locked On Huskies podcast. I'm Roman Tomashoff. That's Lars Hanson. He's site editor with Athlon Sports is Inside the Huskies. I'm the site editor with Huskies Wire. Thanks for making this your first watch or first listen of the day, as we are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Lars, we're coming at the everydayers on this Sunday afternoon because we got so much Junior Day stuff. And this episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when for your first $5 bet wins. Lars, like I said, so much fun stuff from Junior Day, because, usually this is a Monday morning sort of episode, right? So a little bit different coming at all the everydayers on a Sunday evening, because you and I believe that Washington's pick up a ton of momentum on the recruiting trail. We're going to talk about all the guys that we think could commit from this Junior Day weekend, but we got to start with the first one. Three-star defensive back Ksani Jiles, who is the first defensive back to commit to Washington's class, a former Miami commit, plays at IMG Academy in Bradenton, Florida, but is originally from Southern California, went to Bishop Alameda High School. Lars, this is a really big-time ad where you look at his rankings in the 247 Sports composite. He's really, really close to being a four-star prospect, where certainly, people are going to say, oh, that doesn't matter. He's still a three-star. But you look at this offer list, and man, he's got some big-time schools after him.
And again, like you led that with, he was a former Miami commit. So it's not like you're getting a former, no offense, Boise State commit, or, one of those. Sure. Those usually come like later in the process when you make those late October and November offers. But this strikes me as a guy, and it's one that director of high school recruiting, Jaleel Wadud, retweeted. So it was one that kind of caught my eye, where he also said he's shutting everything down. So this isn't just, hey, I'm committing, because he actually had a couple of other official visits set in June, but it sounds like he's not going to take those. So I think this was, and it's funny because this wasn't necessarily a name that we were, saying, hey, like, what, this might be the first one. Like, I don't think either one of us had this one as Jiles as the first one, but it kind of symbolizes what this weekend meant, where there's going to be a ton of talent on campus. Maybe some guys who, have flown a little bit under the radar are now going to, start to reemerge at Washington. And that's almost kind of like when you look at Jedd Fisch, where it's like nobody's really talking about him. Nobody was talking about him. Has that big, 23 season at Arizona, reemerges at Washington. Now it's kind of like, hey, now we're starting to see, no pun intended, but absolutely pun intended, big fish starting to swim with big fish.
So I love where you're going with that. You talk about the official visits. I think that was the reason why neither of us had him on the radar for, hey, maybe this is going to be a guy who pulls the trigger, where, we got some other names. We're going to get to those a little bit later on. But I looked at him, and Lars, you mentioned that it was an official visit. It wasn't just any official visit. He was going to go to Notre Dame, the runner-ups for the national championship. Like, it was a pretty significant visit. Let's talk about some of those other schools that he had in pursuit. Florida, LSU, Ohio State, Texas A&M, Utah, who you and I always like to point out as somebody who's, really good at offering or especially scouting on the defensive side of the ball. So there were some really big time offers in his court, where he could have very easily still taken that Notre Dame official visit. And, obviously we're going to let the process play out, but we're going to take him at his word and say, he says he's committed, he's shutting it down. All right, let's watch that. Let's see it play out, because we're really curious about this defensive back class as a whole. He's listed as a safety on 3, a corner by 247 Sports, and you watch his film and you say he legitimately could play either. If you want to play nickel, he could play nickel. He moves really, really well. He's got super fluid hips. He is, you and I talked about it with Kevin Cummings and wide receivers, somebody who is certainly not playing at a football 101 level. He understands how to flip his hips and run without slowing down. He understands how to attack screens and work through blocks and make an impact in the run game, which is something that I think Ryan Walters is going to really like. Or if he wants to line him up at nickel, great. He's got good size. He's listed at 6 foot 180 by 247 Sports. That's solid enough size to play outside if you want. If you want him to play safety, all right, he can play safety. That's fine. That's something you figure out once he gets on campus. And I'm curious about him in terms of an outside corner perspective, because after this year, you're losing Ephesians Prysock, you're losing Takario Davis, and somebody, of his caliber, where, again, upper tier 3-star, maybe he's going to be a 4-star by the end of the process, depending on how his senior season goes. But you look at it and you can say, all right, this is a really, really solid piece to kick off, 4 or 5 guys, everybody John Richardson wants to take in the secondary.
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting is kind of like what we saw from Jordan Shaw and to a degree Leroy Brown in the nickel this past season. I think it's going to be a little bit different, and that's what makes it so intriguing, because you mentioned like the number of different positions he can play. It's like, well, what's the happy medium of the two? Have him play that nickel position where he's around the ball, sometimes closer, sometimes maybe you're having him drop back as that extra fifth or sixth cornerback. But it's about that versatility. And I think anytime, especially like Ryan Walters mentioned during his opening press conference was, I had a freshman All-American at safety, and I had an outside cornerback who ended up being like second. You have Devon Witherspoon, but not just an outside cornerback, like a guy who can kind of do a little bit of everything. And I'm not saying Jiles is Devon Witherspoon, but I'm just saying it's that versatility where you're looking at a number at the position, like 5 defensive backs, not necessarily 3 safeties, 2 corners, because they have to only be one or the other.
So I think there's a little bit better of a comparison than Devon Witherspoon in terms of Ryan Walters' products, because it's somebody who did play both corner and safety, and it's Sidney Brown, where that's somebody who he had at Illinois, who played a little bit of safety, played a little bit of corner downs with the Eagles. And it's not in terms of a player comparison, but just in terms of that was a really interesting role that he was utilized in. And you talk about, I absolutely could see him playing nickel, but it's one of those things in this case where you get him on campus and you figure it out later. Because you look at the corner room going into 2026, and there's no Scario Davis, there's no Fishians Prysock. So it's, hey, is it Dylan Robinson and Leroy Bryant? Are you going to go hit the portal, which is, obviously not something that we think the staff wants to do a lot of. Like, does Ramon Adams take a step forward? Does Caleb Presley take a step forward? Whoever it might be. And I say all that to say Ksani Jiles, with the technical refinement, I think is the best way to put it. The technical skills that he shows on his tape in terms of his footwork, again, in terms of his lower half, how he moves, that's something that could play early on. I'm not, out here to say he's going to burn his red shirt, he's going to do this, he's going to do that, but that's something we know that Jedd Fisch and this coaching staff likes to do. So if he comes on campus early and he shows, hey, I am advanced, I pick up the playbook really quickly, all of a sudden you could be looking at somebody who could make an impact early on too.
I think the word, you're not wrong with what you said, but the word I was thinking of was range. Like a guy who's got range. And those
he's got great
guys.
Range,
But my point is range, not just sideline to sideline, but I'm saying like range in terms of natural skill set and ability, like all the reasons you touched on. Those are the guys that find playing time as freshmen. It doesn't matter where or how. I would imagine, again, what I'm going to say, special teams. Like, be a gunner, be in kick coverage, do things like that. Show that you can make those open tackles in space and make an impact in that realm. Then you get to playing time, and then you can kind of figure out where he's going to be on the field on the defensive side. But I think, when you look at, you'd also expect, Rayshon, like if it ends up being nickel, Rayshon Clark's going to be there. Alex McLaughlin does have 2 years left, so it depends on what we're looking at here. There's a number of different guys that are going to be in that position, and the ultimate question is, like, it doesn't matter who's going to rise to the top, but the point is you get all those bodies in the room, and by the way, that's how you improve special teams. Where maybe Alex McLaughlin's on special teams, and the other one, and pick one of the other two, is that getting more snaps in nickel. Where I'm not obviously expecting Alex McLaughlin to safety special teams. But the point is you use all those different types of bodies to say, well, now you're going to have a better special teams coverage. Now you'll be better on defense, where some of those, shall we say, tackles that were missed against Penn State and a few others down the stretch aren't necessarily happening because the better players playing those snaps and other guys are making their other roles matter in other ways. And so it's just about elevating the talent and, to start everything off with, getting a former Miami commit. Like, I think Will Harris is down there now, former UW defensive back coach, was also at Florida. So again, Will, knows how to identify talent. And so you look at that and think, man, you're able to go and get a guy who we should know originally from California, is now at IMG, coming back to the West Coast. It's making sure the premium elite skill set talent that you have on the West Coast doesn't stay on the East Coast or in the Midwest once those guys potentially go to like IMG for high school. You don't want those kids. You say, hey, get the exposure, play at IMG. They got great coaching, no doubt. There's a couple of IMGs, Bosco and a few others on the West Coast. If you can go to IMG, great. But let's make sure we get you back home on the West Coast where you belong for college and hopefully in the NFL.
And it's starting to build that strong connection to IMG. We talked about Keeney Pepe on this show, obviously West Coast tackle who goes over there now, but it's getting Raiden Vinesbright in last year's class and continuing to just develop a pipeline to that school. Because to your point, adding, that to getting guys from St. John Bosco, from Modern Day, from wherever else in the Trinity League, those are all important things that'll add up. But Lars, Ksani Jiles is a really great start. It leaves the question, who's next? And we'll get to that right after a message from our friends over at Supply House. Get the supplies you need from the site made for the skilled trades. Supply House, whether you're in plumbing, HVAC, or electrical work, Supply House is the reliable way to order products online. Their easy-to-use website is packed with helpful resources and the latest product info to help you get the job done right. Plus, with a complete inventory of over 200,000 parts from 400-plus top brands, you'll find exactly what you need delivered fast from coast to coast. Need help with an order? Supply House offers expert support and industry-leading service, so you'll always talk to a real person. And for trade pros looking for an extra edge, their free Trade Master program offers exclusive perks like a dedicated phone line, free shipping, and discounts on every order. Thousands of skilled professionals are already taking advantage. Now it's your turn. Join the Trade Master program today at supplyhouse.com/TM and start ordering plumbing, HVAC, and electrical supplies with just a few clicks. Plus, use promo codes SH5 for 5% off your first order. That's supplyhouse.com. We've also got a message from our friends over at Wayfair. Your home should reflect your style with Wayfair. It's easier than ever to make that happen. Whether you're looking for a simple refresh or tackling a big home project, Wayfair has everything you need in one place. Wayfair's huge selection makes it easy to find the perfect piece, no matter your space or budget. From cozy furniture and stylish decor to kitchen essentials and outdoor must-haves, Wayfair has it all, and at prices that fit your budget. Finding the perfect piece is so easy. I was looking for a new couch to tie my living room together because I got a nice old couch over there, and I like it, but I just need something a little better. And Wayfair has so many stylish options at great prices. Head over to wayfair.com and find something that's just your style today. That's WAYFAIR.com. Wayfair, every style, every home. So, Lars, you and I have been on the Twitter machine a little bit today. We've seen Scotty Graham tweeting out some cryptic emojis. Director of high school with recruiting Jalil Wadood doing something similar. And it's interesting because there are a whole lot of guys that I know. You mentioned a couple of them. We saw some guys sitting courtside. We're going to get to that. Don't worry, because I think there's one that we need to start with here. And it's the easy one because Brandon Huffman put in a crystal ball for him already. And that's 3-star Mount Tahoma cornerback Elijah Durr.
Yeah, that was one where once you see the crystal ball start going in, it's like, oh, okay, now what's the time? Like, that's when the clock starts. Like, that's when you hit, like, the timer starts. Like, okay, how long until we get the first commit? And then, of course, like we let off the show, Giles ended up being the first one. It's like, oh, wait, okay. So, but it clearly identifies that Ryan Walters and his defensive staff have kind of identified that secondary is getting refined. Like, and that's, I think, exactly what we've been expecting. But it's good to see you're also getting one from literally both sides of the country, where you're going to Florida, get one, and then stay home and get one, because like we talked about, like Elijah Durr, 6'1", 175, 180, somewhere in that range. And I think where anytime, clearly they love the state of Washington when it comes to defensive backs. Rashawn Clark, was the first one of the guys at Arizona who was like, hey, I want to go to Arizona because John Richardson knows how to identify talent. And so I think, getting him on the boat early, like we knew one of the in-state guys was probably going to end up at Washington from this weekend, maybe a couple more, obviously, but
I've got one, yeah.
Well, but I'm thinking, as the first, like in terms of the first crystal ball, first one to be like, hey, because they still have Adian Yang, you already got Watson Lobby, so I'm not saying it's the first one of the class, it's just the first.
Oh no, I was saying from this past weekend, yeah, because I had a different one that I wanted to make sure I mentioned. Sorry, because also Darian Clemens too. I love his film from the 25 class. So nice. It's a nice build in state, right? Where you get Rashawn Clark to start, you get Darian Clemens last year, and now assuming Elijah Durr, the crystal balls are correct and he pulls the trigger as well. That's a really nice just way to build up in state, where we've seen that not necessarily be the case in previous years, where Josiah Wagner is one who I think of when he went to Oklahoma. Like that was a tough loss at the time. Flipping Caleb Presley was solid, but you want to see more consistency in that realm and in state, and that's something this staff has been really, really good at so far. But another in-state guy that I want to talk about that, if he pulls the trigger, I wouldn't be too surprised. It's David Schwerzel. We talked about him the other day, and so we don't need to necessarily spend a whole heck of a long time on him, but it's one of those things where we know what the focus of this class is, and it's defensive line. And, it would be great if a Sean Scott or an Anthony Jones or, Derek Coleman Bruce, obviously being the big one here, or Bot Milutalo, one of those guys decides, hey, yeah, I'm coming to Washington. I'm going to announce that and make it public now. That'd be great. But getting somebody like David Schwerzel in the boat early on, who is one of those, hometown guys that is still a very highly sought after pass rusher, where, I know he's got a Michigan offer, and it seems like those are the two schools that are battling for him right now. If David Schwerzel decides to stay home this early on, it's a great selling point and key recruiting piece when you think about that first recruiting weekend, when Derek Coleman Bruce is coming on as official. Tyson Bacon, the Tennessee commit, is coming on an official. Plus David, probably see a couple more guys end up scheduling for that weekend as well. That's just a really solid start to the class from somebody who can play inside, play outside, and just build a 5, 6, 7-man defensive line class.
Well, it's one thing that getting David Schwerzel early on in the process doesn't preclude anything else. Like, I think that's probably the summation of it is it's a foundational piece that you can build off of and say, you know what, we got our first inside guy. Ideally, we want 2 more along the defensive line, referring to Derek Coleman Bruce and FSCL, his O'Day teammate. But I think it's also what Taylor May has mentioned, even though coaches and safeties, it's, hey, like, hopefully my love and connections with Monty Kohler and all the people at O'Day are, strong as ever, and hopefully they can help us in certain ways in the program. Again, he couldn't say during the press conference, hey, I hope, because again, you don't hire Taylor Mays just to get FSCL and David Schwerzel. But O'Day has been a strong pipeline for Washington. O'Day produces good in-state talent. And so I think anytime that you can, strengthen that relationship that already exists is a perfect way to build up the class.
So we've been hinting at it for a while. Do you want to get to what we saw on the sidelines of the basketball game today now, or do you want to hold off for another minute or two?
No, let's get it there. It's cresting. It's already there.
It's fair. No, please take it away.
So I pointed it out to you after the fact. So we had both realized that there was a handful of Washington players that we should probably saw. I don't know if she was down there at the time, but there was, Jonah Coleman was down there at one point, and it almost seemed
yeah.
Right. Well, again, from where we sit in the press row, it's kind of like behind and to the right, or I guess, behind and to the right a little bit. But there was a certain quarterback wearing a backwards hat that you pointed out, and it was like, oh wait, is that so-and-so? And then we kind of checked with a few sources, a few methods, and then God bless the UW in-house production person for putting a camera on Brady Smigel for like a 1/10 of a second, where you're going to see Brady Smigel's face, and he was jumping up and down when the game was tied in that final minute there. And what I put out on Twitter was, well, I'll clarify one of the tweets, which was, when I saw Brady Smigel courtside, I tweeted out, I think 5 minutes or so after I spotted him. I just wanted to make sure it was him and everything like that. But he was jumping up and down, having fun, and it already looked like, and this is the tweet that I put out, if I didn't know that he was a recruit, I would have thought it was like Dash Beerley or Tristan Keenan McMillan. If I didn't know what those guys look like, because he was just so engaged and already present with Washington, where I'm fair to say, I had a few people ask me on Twitter, Washington the leader. It's like, I would be surprised if he doesn't end up at Washington. I won't say when. I'll just say at this point, like, I mean, again, big John Cena fan growing up, love the heel turn and all that, but it would take that type of heel turn for Brady Smigel to not end up at Washington at this point.
So I like where you're going with that. Let's talk about who was with him. One of the guys we saw sitting directly behind him was 3-star tight end Landen Miree, where that was one where it seems like those two really talked a lot on this visit. We saw them posting some pictures together. You pointed out that I think it was an Instagram story or something where Landon was able to get on FaceTime with a former Jedd Fisch coworker, Zach Taylor, the head coach of the Cincinnati Bengals. Landon being from Ohio, I'm sure that was really special for him. I think that's really cool. And shout out to Jedd for being able to have his connections and do things like that. But it's something where you and I talked about it last week regarding Brady Smigel, that he wants to be able to recruit a strong class around him. And Landon, we opened this show talking about Ksani Jiles, who has a really strong offer list despite being, ranked as a 3-star, and people are going to say 3-star you and this and that. You go through and you look at Landen Miree's offer list, man, like I honestly stick to mainly just recruits that are considering Washington when I think of just offer list, but he's got 35 offers. He's a 3-star tight end from Ohio. Like, this is a really, really sought after prospect. And it's not, just like, Akron, Ball State, whatever. It's LSU, it's Florida State. It's all these big time schools that are in pursuit of him. So if that's somebody you're able to get out to Washington, like, seems like he'll be coming back for an official. I know he's already got it set up, but that's a really big selling point. And seeing those two together is certainly something to keep an eye on.
Man, Akron and Ball State is catching absolute strays.
My apologies. I say it with all due respect.
No, I know exactly what you meant. I was like, what? Throw University of Findlay in there, why don't you? But with that being said, no, it's exactly. This was a validation weekend. It's what I mentioned on the show, I think on Friday or Thursday, where I said, we know how good of a salesman. I know I hate to use that word, but it's like, he's a good recruiter, and I think it's about the connections and relationships and the way you can validate those relationships. It's one thing to say, hey, I have so-and-so on this. I can, I went to the NFL. I did this and that versus, hey, here's my phone. Here's Zach Taylor. There you go. have fun and talk to him. Just again, no pressure, but it's like, whoa, like Mike. And again, it's not like a like flex. It is a flex, right?
It absolutely is. Yeah,
we talked about that over the weekend, but it's not one of those like, hey, it's not a look at me flex. It's just like a cool. Here you go. Like, no, I'm glad you pointed that out. It was Landon's Instagram story that I got that from. It wasn't like he put that out there or like they're trying to make a big deal out of it. So it's like, no, it's those little details that really matter at the end of the day. Much like in football, the NFL comes down to the little details, those one or two key plays at the end that really separate the good from the great teams. That's why you have Jedd Fisch at Washington to make it great.
No, I absolutely agree. And it's one thing where shout out to our buddy Scott Eklund, who was posted up at the junior day, just log in that guys did arrive. And there's one thing that because you and I were texting about this yesterday, just to fully pull back the curtain on what you're talking about there. And I said, hey, in Scott's photo, it looked like a family member, whoever it was wearing like a Bengals sweater. So it's one of those little things that it's not necessarily a little detail, right? Because it's very clearly posted up on his shirt, but it's like, hey, yeah, you're a Bengals fan. Here you go. Let me call my old coworker sort of thing. It's just fun stuff like that where, people, you see it a lot. People get tired of constantly selling the NFL and saying this and saying that, where it's, hey, here's how I'm backing it up on the recruiting trail, because those are things that resonate.
Exactly. And I think that, where every coach is going to be different. Like, Bill Belichick could probably do the same thing, but instead he's dapping up guys on the sideline. I would rather have Jedd do this where Jedd really is that kind of like, we got to do a podcast on who dresses Jedd one of these days. But, it's one of those where like, it's more legitimate for Jedd to be like, here, talk to Zach Taylor. He's my old buddy. I used to coach them for a couple of years. Then, hey, what's up? Hey, what's up? Not that he's not like can't be cool like that, but it's just like, wouldn't you agree it's more authentic for Jedd than just to hand him a phone and be like, hey, you know what? Here, you go to this. I'm gonna go talk to some other recruits, because that is way more valuable to me and you than you and I just shooting the stuff with him and in the recruiting lounge. So I think when you everything is authentic, and this was like it validated everything that Jedd's been working to sell and build up and laying the foundation for everything. This was the weekend to kick it all off.
And it was also a weekend where Washington gained a lot of momentum. And we'll get to that right after a message from our good friends over at FanDuel. March Madness is here, and FanDuel is giving you the chance to get in on the action like never before. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. That's $200 extra bucks to use on everything from buzzer beaters to Cinderella stories, and even who's cutting down the nets. I've got my eye on a few underdogs this year, and FanDuel makes it easy to back them with spreads, totals, and game props. And with tournament games happening almost every day, there's always something exciting to bet on. The FanDuel app is so simple to use, and when I win, I get paid instantly. So there's no waiting around. So visit FanDuel.com to get in on the college hoops action all tournament long. So Lars, like we just talked about a little bit, you and I got a firsthand look where obviously, media policy state, we're not allowed to talk to recruits on campus. I just want to make that very, very clear. We're, if people are wondering, you're saying all this, like that's something where, again, I know we said on Friday's show, I want to remind all the everydayers right now, we're hoping to get at least a couple of these guys on the show over the next, let's just call it month or so, and just talk to them a little bit about this experience and everything like that. But you look down on the sideline, you mentioned it, there were a couple other guys who we just couldn't really tell who they were from the angle that we were sitting at that were alongside X-Ray Alexander, Damon Williams, Takaria Davis, Fishins Prasak. That just looked like they were having a great time. And obviously that's part of the point of one of these visits, right? But combine that with all of the high-end recruits from not just 2026, 2027, 2028, where Reese Russell is an interesting 2027 offensive line prospect. He got an offer this weekend. You look at some of the 2027 top in-state guys that were on campus, some 2028 in-state guys as well. And it's just, you look at all the momentum that Jedd is trying to build on the recruiting trail, and you look at a weekend like this, and you see so many blue-chip prospects on campus, and you say, yeah, it looks like it's starting to pay off.
Yeah, so I'm glad I didn't fire this tweet off because, again, context does matter. So I'd rather say it on the show than fire it off in a bad tweet. Where I was walking around the concourse at halftime, as I mentioned to you after I got back, who I bumped into, and I won't say everybody that I bumped into. But one of the thoughts that as I got like halfway around, I saw Jason Capucci talking to a recruit and his parents, and just on the concourse, like fans, when you're looking around, pay attention. Again, now I would also implore you, please, much like most celebrities and things, don't interrupt somebody when they're having something, but just like, hey, look what's around you. Experience. This is what Washington can be, where like coaches are interacting with families on the concourse and you're watching a really good game. Even though Washington ended up losing to Oregon, it was a pretty good game. And it's, I was kind of sitting there, like, there's so much talent in this building. That's what was coming to mind. So that's what I was going to tweet, but I didn't want to walk around the concourse. But man, there's a lot of talent around this concourse. Like, because again, that can go so many different ways. But the point is, like, I was walking past so many big guys, and then you also see like Champion and the freshman, and it's like, this is really like Washington is sitting on, some dynamite, and just if this fall it can explode in a good way, this could be even better next year and beyond.
So I want to address one little thing that I saw it on Twitter. I pointed it out while we were sitting in the press box as well. All of those guys that were in the first row, they started getting into it with the Oregon bench guys, where there was a three that somebody on Oregon hit. I don't remember who it was, with like just under 4 minutes to play. And the Oregon bench started barking at all the UW football players, all the recruits, everything was going on. And they just started giving it right back. And, I think it was Andrew Percival put it out on Twitter, like, oh, the usher came over and shut it down. I can't remember what fully happened there, but it was just fun to see all those guys getting into it and getting into the culture of Washington, where again, it's not just Damon, it's not just Jonah and Takario and Prysock and the guys that are already here, but it's all the recruits as well saying, oh yeah, no, we're here, we're into this. Like, that's just all the fun little stuff where, you talk about just the sales pitch paying off. Those are the little moments where, if Brady does end up at Washington, Landen ends up at Washington, a couple of those other guys that were sitting there, you can go back through and say, yeah, they looked like they were bought into what was going on.
So I'll take another page out of your book where it was a corner, it wasn't a corner three, it was like a mid-range pull-up. It was, I think, number 3 on Oregon, who, crossed somebody over on UW, ended up hitting a pullback 12-footer, switched home, said something right past Brady Smigel, and Brady said something back, and it was like, again, that same sort of thing.
I missed that. I didn't see that.
I'm pretty sure it's because it was like it went right in front of those guys as he turned around to run back to the other end. And again, it wasn't inappropriate, like there wasn't any push, and nobody got up or did anything, but you can very clearly say, it's like, oh, you're gonna say something. I already got something on the tip of my tongue. Like, you say something, I got no problem saying it back. Answers the question, which rivalry matters more? It's Oregon, Washington. It ain't even close. Like that's, and I think, but that's what's kind of fun is it's like, when people, they can say, hey, like, remember last year, this weekend, when Brady Smigel was visiting and the Oregon ended up winning the game. Next year, Danny Sprinkle beats Oregon or whoever to win, and Brady Smigel is hosting a recruit on that weekend. Like, again, it's those little things where it's like, hey, yeah, last year you got us, but now look at us. And look at us on the field this year in football with what Damon just did. And, everything builds on a culture of itself. And I will say this, because did you notice Jedd down there when the 24-ish players, newcomers, were introduced during the game? Because in UW's video, they showed Jedd walking on the court. I didn't really notice Jedd at all. But the reason why I say that and highlight that is this is clearly a player-run program. Like, it's in Jedd's image. It is very much in Jedd's image. But you can see how much influence the players have on this program, where it's like, look, you know what? Jonah, appreciate you guys are much better recruiters than me. I'm just the guy calling honestly, Jedd's probably like, I'm just the guy calling the plays. I'm the quarterback, whisperer, guru, all those sorts of things with Jimmy. And that's why Jimmy Doherty is a good recruiter. And I put out the photo of Brady Smigel with Jimmy in the offices. It looked like where phones down. And I could very clearly see it's almost one of those, hey, like, we might use this in a commitment graphic where, hey, my phone's down, decision has been made. I put that tweet out there where it's, hey, all smiles. I didn't say decision made, but it's like all smiles with Jimmy Doherty. And it was just a good vibes weekend. And it was, even though the basketball outcome wasn't what you hoped it would be, honestly, great game, good turnout. It kind of fed the environment of like, Oregon did do a little bit better than Washington this past season. But Washington is right there, and all the talent that's around it on this campus, bought being on campus. As an Oregon commit, it's like, hey, guess what? Frank Kepton, former Oregon player, came up to Washington. It's like there's a really unique part in that rivalry that was just kind of symbolic of the day where it's like, yeah, Washington's not done. They're just getting started.
No, absolutely. And I think that's a really important thing where, a couple names that we haven't mentioned yet that we're just guys we want to make sure we throw out there are Deshaun Rideau, Brian Bonner, Mason James, some of those big time offensive skill players where it's not just the Brady Smigel factor we've been talking about here, but it's the fact that they're open and they're receptive to this pitch, even though Washington is pretty deep at running back moving forward. They already have a 4-star commit in the boat, and that Washington is obviously so deep at wide receiver as well. The fact that all these guys are on campus and just seemingly very receptive to what this whole pitch is from Kevin Cummings, from Jedd Fisch, Jimmy Doherty, whoever it is that you want to throw out there, Scotty Graham, obviously you gotta make sure you shout him out in that boat as well. But I'm just really curious what this is going to look like over the next, like March 9th right now. Let's call it 4 months, because obviously a lot of these guys want to make sure they're committed by the start of their senior season, so you don't have to worry about it going in. And it seems like Washington does have the ability to pull in a top-tier recruiting class. And we saw them close on some really high-level prospects last year. Obviously not as many as, you and I expected, especially, you seeing Vander Plug and Zach Staskowski flip to Oregon in the final months of the cycle. But we look at this and we say, all right, that was the laying the foundation, as you like to say, and you were able to get a lot of these guys on campus. Now it's time for you to close them. And I think having a weekend like this, we didn't really see this last year because there was so much more concern about making sure that you had a full roster for the season. So being able to have this big weekend shows that players are buying into what Jedd is selling. Now the question is, can you close on them? Because, this is all about momentum. That's where the momentum really comes from.
Right. And well, this weekend, if we could kind of surmise it in one sentence, this is the weekend where you should either, get a couple commits if you're so lucky or fortunate, but it's really about crystallizing, guys coming back in June and May for official visits after the spring's over. It's like, hey, but we want to get you in a way. This is the reason what junior days are, and what junior day was in this case, this weekend for Jedd, was we want to get everybody that we really like, hey, you guys are the top 35, let's call it, for the 26 class, because there were some 27s and 28s on campus, which were great, but we'll not talking about you right now. Getting the 26 guys, they call it 3 dozen on campus. Of those 3 dozen, you're hoping at least 2 dozen, if not the entire group, comes back and says, hey, we want to take official visits. And then of that 3 dozen, let's say you get 20.
Sure.
That's 20 out of 36. And that's the type of aim you're looking for, where, if you happen to get him this weekend, like Jiles and potentially Elijah Durr and others, great, even better. That just legitimizes everything we've been saying. But beyond that, it's, hey, no, we wanted to come out this weekend on our own dime. You guys pay for the next trip when we, might finalize this thing. That's in a way, it was like the business of college football. It's like, hey, look, we'll take care of this one. We like you guys a lot. And this weekend was so important to, have those relationship moments where we can sit with the parents and talk to them for 2 days, not just, a couple hours and, hey, we're going to come up and, see the campus and see the tour. This wasn't a tour weekend. This was a come investigate the tunnels and how this program actually works type of operation. And then you come back in June, either already committed or ready to announce your commitment, so that, like you said, by the time your senior year is coming around, it's like, oh, the decision's already been made. We're good. Not even worried.
Lars, as always, thank you so much for being here. Thank all everydayers tuning in. We really do appreciate your support. And just a heads up, because we're going to be dropping episodes like this when guys commit. We'll have bonus shows, everything like that. The best way to make sure you're up to date with everything that's going on around the program is to subscribe wherever you get your podcast, whether that's YouTube, Spotify, Apple News, Games on Music. We're there. We're everywhere. We're updating this channel with new content every single day. So make sure you click that like button, click that little bell so you don't miss when we post a new video. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, drop them right down below in the comment section. And if you're audio only, please, if it's 5-star reviews, it does help us out a lot. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we'll talk to you on Tuesday.